Deputy Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois Black Panther Party.
Repeat after me. I am a revolutionary. 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 I am a revolutionary.
You're looking at 18 months for the stolen car, 5 years for impersonating a federal officer, or you can go home.
The Black Panthers are forming a rainbow coalition of oppressed brothers and sisters of every color.
Their aim is to sow hatred and inspire terror.
I will learn all that I can.
These ain't no terrorists.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom. Hey! A revolutionary! I am a revolutionary! I am a revolutionary! I'm gonna die for the people because I live for the people. I live for the people because I love the people.
What's going on, people? Welcome to this BFI home event. I'm Akala, and I'm joined today by Shaka King, Daniel Kaluuya, LaKeith Stanfield, and Dominique Fishback to discuss their new film, Judas and the Black Messiah. So let's jump right into it, guys. How did you guys come to be involved in this project? Obviously, each at various stages, but if you can each tell us how you came to be involved in this particular project.
I came to be involved. My involvement starts with the Lucas brothers, who had the idea for the film. They approached me about 4 years ago and said they wanted to make a movie about William O'Neill and Fred Hampton that they envisioned as the departed set inside the world of COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO was essentially an sort of internal organization and movement that the FBI really spearheaded by J. Edgar Hoover, that was aimed at crushing voices of dissent, that any voices that J. Edgar Hoover deemed voices of dissent within the nation. And I was familiar with COINTELPRO, and I was somewhat familiar with Fred Hampton, and I had no familiarity whatsoever with William O'Neill. And so when they walked me through what he'd done, I just, kind of very vividly just saw what this movie could be and the potential for it. And the three of us started developing a script, and then brought on board many collaborators, including, the folks you see here. So I'll let them sort of talk about how they got involved.
Daniel?
Yeah, I got involved. I was on set of a Black Panther reshoot, and Ryan Coogler and Zinzi Coogler, who the producers of the film, pulled me to the side and we're like, yo, we're making this film with Shaka King and LaKeith. It's about Fred Hampton. We love you to play Fred Hampton. LaKeith's playing O'Neill. We look at the treatment. So I was like, yeah, I was just like, wow, it's an incredible honor for you to ask me to play Chairman Fred. And then I read the treatment. It was a 2-page treatment, which is a hard medium to get a story across, but it was so engaging as a treatment. So I read that. And then I met with Shaka. I was in the middle of the Get Out press. I met with Shaka in New York, sat down with him. I thought he was amazing. Then he mentioned all the other people he wanted. He said he wanted Dominique Fishback and Jesse Plemons. I was like, oh man, he knows what the hell's going on. Do you know what I mean? He knows what time it is. Then I read the script after the Get Out press, and I was just blown away. I was just blown away by Chairman Fred's words. You know what I'm saying? It's like Shaka always says, is like, there's a lot of information about how he died, but not a lot of information about how incredibly he lived, And so that was a kind of like a window into that. And then I was like, yeah, I'm in.
Great. LaKeith?
Yeah, Shaka hit me, bro. I worked with Shaka before, and he was like, yeah, I got this Black Panther. I'm like, what? So he sent me the script, and yeah, I just assumed I was gonna be playing Fred Hampton. He didn't even really say I was gonna be playing him, but I just assumed that shit. So I read the whole thing. I was like, yo, that's a dope script. He was like, nah, we actually want you to play William O'Neill. I was like, what the fuck? I don't want to play this dude. Like that was my initial thought, but you know, I dug into it and thought it could be a unique opportunity to have perspective on it and challenge myself to do something that's outside of me. You know?
It's funny because that really anticipates one of my questions. I am going to come straight to you, Dominique, but it anticipates one of my questions so much that I figure I may as well pick it up here. You know, you play in this film the snitch, right? The difficult character within the community, somebody that is going to be.
Don't say that. I'm offended, bro.
How do you approach a role like that and still give your character human flaws and still give your character an angle? And what is the approach to that? Especially as you say from the beginning, everyone would look at it and be like, Fred. But then how do you approach a character like William O'Neill?
I mean, you know, people are human, man, you know? And what you would do in those situations, a lot of people like to speculate, but what would you really do in those situations? Like, people are human, man. I can't play a character that's not human, you know? And so we all do things that are for self-preservation first, usually, you know? And then we think about it. Like Fred Hampton wasn't a normal human being. He was like a Jesus figure, right? Like, that's a person who really puts things before himself. Like, you know, most of us are like William O'Neill, right? So, yeah, I thought that was more interesting than like playing like Jafar, you know what I'm saying? Like some creepy shit. Like, no, man, like people are humans, bro, you know? So I thought that was that's what I want to see, you feel me? Like that's what draws me in, like a real human. But it was hard, I ain't gonna lie. Shit, I was conflicted the whole time. I was like, I don't even know if I'm doing the right thing, man. Like, you know, I had to ask Shaka, like, bro, this shit cool? Like, you're like, nah, it's cool.
Dominique, what about yourself? What was your journey in terms of getting involved in the film?
Yeah, I got an email from my team saying that Shaka King wrote and is going to direct a film about Chairman Fred Hampton, and that he wanted me to play Deborah Johnson, and that Daniel and LaKeith were already attached, and Ryan and Charles King were attached as well. And I had to reread the email, like, are they saying that like it's my role, or do I have to like go on tape, or what's happening? Like I couldn't really understand what's happening. Then I met with Shaka and I reiterated. I said, "So wait, this is mine, or you telling me like somebody else gonna have to say?" And he was like, "No, the role's yours if you want it." So he said, "Read the script and let me know your thoughts." And so I read the script and I gave him a whole long email about all of the things that I love. And I said I had 2 thoughts, but I didn't want to overstep. And he said, "You can't overstep. You'll be playing her. What are your notes?" And I said, I talked about poetry, and he offered that I write the poem in the movie that she says to Chairman Fred. And because he said that, I was like, well, I was thinking, can she have a journal? And then so that journal became a thing where I would write every day about little things that I could have imagined that she was going through. And so the way that I got attached was also in a way where I felt like the collaborators and the people that I would be working with would value my voice, because that was really important. I asked him if the family was going to be involved. That was important. So again, like, this is a big deal. This is our history. I've cared about the Panthers for such a long time that, I'm just meeting Shaka. I'm liking his vibes. I'm feeling he's, credible and authentic, but I still had to be like, the family's involved. And because he was so open to me as a collaborator, and that he cared about what I had to say, made me feel safe, before we went to go meet the family. So.
And that anticipates another great question. Can you guys talk me through that process? Like, this is such important history within the community, right? Did you feel A, the pressure and the weight of that, and then B, like the process of like meeting the family and, getting their approval and buy-in and whatever else? What was that process like for you guys?
Well, the truth of the matter is that as soon as we had a draft that we felt was reflective of the movie we wanted to make, we reached out to the family via Rosa Clemente, who had a relationship with Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. And so we flew out to Chicago, myself, Ryan, Zinzi, Charles King, who's one of our producers on the film. And we met with Rosa Clemente, who facilitated that introduction. And we met with them that first time, probably 12 hours. It's a 12-hour meeting. We would fly to Chicago over the course of a year. We flew there, I think, maybe 3 to 4 times, eventually bringing Dominique and Daniel with us as well. In those meetings, we would meet in Fred Hampton's childhood home. And I remember the first time we came there, we didn't know that's where we were meeting. We just were given an address. And you enter the space, and the moment you entered the space, you knew you were in his childhood home. You knew everything, like you felt it. It's such a magical place. And, you know, I think going into that space, just that first time, really crystallized for all of us the importance of getting this right. And, you know, the importance of, we initially came to the family to, you know, get their blessing as a matter of principle. It just was the right thing to do. It felt like, you know, I felt that way, Ryan felt that way, Charles felt that way, Zinzi felt that way. But almost instantly going there, we realized how valuable their input could and would be if we were to get there, you know, get them to come on board as cultural consultants, which eventually we did, because details that, you know, you and I might find, you know, innocuous they hold incredible ramifications and power to, you know, the people who actually went through this thing. And, you know, so it was deeply important that we connect with them and that they support us in making this film. And the film is far better off for it. And we are better off for it as people as well, I feel. And
you said at the beginning that you were somewhat familiar with Fred, but what was the research process like once you knew you were making the film? Reading Fred's words, all that sort of thing. What was the research process like? Also, the challenge of making a film about a Black socialist revolutionary within a big Hollywood context of a big Hollywood studio. Did that present any challenges? Were there creative difficulties, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, to start with the research, you know, a million books, not just about Fred Hampton, but also about Chicago politics during the time, about the National Party as a whole, about William O'Neill, the tidbits that we could find. You know, so there was, you know, obviously the academic process, but then there was also, you know, talking to former Illinois chapter members that we were fortunate enough to get, you know, comfortable to open up to us. Obviously, you know, speaking to Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. and Akula Najeri. But, you know, it was an exhaustive process that was ongoing. I mean, throughout the shoot, you know, we were constantly learning more about the subject matter that we were taking on. And in terms of the challenges of making, you know, a Hollywood movie about a Black socialist revolutionary, we were fortunate in that, you know, I always got to give a shout out to Nigel Kirkendall, who was one of our main execs at Warner Bros. You know, she's one of the few Black executives in her position in Hollywood. And she'd been trying to make a movie about the Black Panther Party for about 10 years before we brought this film there. And so I do think that really did lay the groundwork in a lot of ways in terms of the studio not ever really questioning the politics of this movie, ever, which shocked me. You know, I anticipated that even in post, you know, okay, now they're gonna come out and try to, you know what I mean? I had my shank, you know, like y'all are not, you know, and I didn't need it. I just didn't need it, you know? And it surprised me. And, you know, there were times when I mean, you know, I don't want to get too long-winded, but I remember even the Hoover intro, you know, which we found a way to get that in a place where I was comfortable with it. But there was a time when we were talking about, you know, literally starting the movie with that, and that being really problematic to me. Just, you know, us starting a movie about the Black Panthers and the first people you meet, you know, are Jesse Plemons and Martin Sheen. That really bothered me. And when I voiced that concern, it was heard and it was addressed, and we found points of interest. And so, you know, to sum up my answer, the way that this got made was that all of us found points of interest, but the studio did always defer to the politics of the filmmaking team, and myself and Charles and Ryan and Zinzi were 1,000% aligned politically from the beginning, that we all agreed to make this movie.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And what about you guys, for the actors, to all of you, what was your research process and your way of prepping for each of your characters?
Yeah, I went to, Shaka gave me the Black Panther reading list. And so I'd read the majority of the books on that reading list. So you have to go through 6 weeks of political education in order to be a fully fledged Panther. So I read the majority of the reading list, and for me, it was like understanding the mindset and the concepts and the perspective before I approached the man. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I'm taking in information about him specifically from that lens, as opposed from my lens. I needed to inform my view on them, as opposed to like looking at them, like looking with them. So I did that, and then I went to Chicago. I spent a week in Chicago, and I just took myself out. I wanted to meet the family because I couldn't really see them on that trip. But I would just go to his childhood home, go to his family home, go to where he went elementary school, where they went high school, speak to the people in Maywood, speak to people around there, speak to people that knew the old timers, the OGs, and then like went to places where he speak at and speak to the people out there and speak to how they felt about him from the places that he used to be. And then at night I would read dissertations, read books, read stuff about that Shaka and Will sent to me about like the politics in Chicago and the world at that time. Do you know what I'm saying? To get a concept. And then I dove into him as an individual. Do you know what I'm saying? Because at the beginning of the research, it was just a lot of information about how he died. You know what I'm saying? It was kind of like there was nothing to hold on to. It was like all these detailed stuff about the police. I was like, this is all stuff about white people. You know what I'm saying? And it was, that part was quite frustrating. So I had to kind of go out there and talk to people and just be out there. But it was, I just read so much. I just followed my nose. And if someone said, oh yeah, you should read that, and I would just go there and I would spend like a day or two reading a book, and then I go somewhere else, I'd spend a day or two reading another book, you know? So I kind of approached it like that.
Dominique?
Well, when I heard about the movie, I read the assassination of Fred Hampton. And then because the production kept getting pushed back, Shaka and I would kind of meet in like cafes in Brooklyn and kind of just start talking about, oh, I learned this, or I read this, and we kind of talked like that. But once it came to like being on set, I think everything for me was more intuitive. I really went from a internal feminine kind of approach, where I was writing a lot, where I was watching Daniel a lot, like take up space. Sometimes he'd be like, what you looking at? I'm like, nothing. And then I'm like writing, like, you know, and then seeing how, because Mama Akua, when we met them at the family, she talked about the discipline that the Black Panther Party had, and that there were certain things she would have never said to the Chairman Fred, but she's such a firecracker woman that I'm just like, how could she not speak up or say something? And I don't think it was about speaking up necessarily. It was just the level of trust that he garnered from people. You know, and when you're able to trust people, I don't know if you have to be that defensive. And I think Daniel, like his existence, his presence, kind of, I was so open that I allowed him to do that for me, and so I could see how I would flow and move as it were with him. I just kind of let everything be intuitive in that way.
Amazing. LaKeith?
Shaka helped me a lot with that, man. He gave me a whole bunch of things to read and, gave context for who William O'Neill was outside of, even after the Black Panther Party. And then I saw the unedited version of Eyes on the Prize too. And then I was like, damn, that's all I really needed to see. I was like, all right, cool. Like this guy feels things, and then, just kind of went from there, build up from there.
Given everything that's happened in the last year, the timing of this film in a way couldn't be more perfect, I would say. Why do you guys feel this film is so relevant in the here and now? If you feel presumably you feel it's so relevant in the here and now. Why at this moment in particular?
You go ahead, Dominique, you're about to speak.
I was just gonna say that over the past summer 2020, when everybody came together and marched, it was similar to what Chairman Fred talked about with the Rainbow Coalition. We got to see people of all walks of life coming together under one kind of common goal. And so I think in terms of that, when I think around that time, people's consciousness began to shift and they became more open. And so I think in having the movie come now, people were hungry and looking for more information, more human accounts to these people that we've read so much about.
Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. in this interview I was watching today said people's political pores are open, which I thought was just a profound way of putting that. You know, and there's so many connections that I draw from the present to this movie. You know, from the fact that the pandemic is ravaging Black and brown communities, you know, far more than it is, you know, white affluent communities. You know, and the fact that the Panthers, one of the, you know, main touchstones of the work that they were trying to do was provide access and help to proper healthcare for Black and brown folks. You know, I look at the events, you know, in terms of the riot at the Capitol, right? And the fact that you had, you know, a lot of poor white people acting against their own interests who've been radicalized, and they've been, you know, traditionally radicalized to act against their own interests and, you know, direct their anger and frustration towards people that look like us, when they really should be directing it towards people who look like them. So they're the folks who are, you know, oppressing them. And the fact that, you know, Fred Hampton and the, you know, Black Panther Party on a national level were talking about these things, then talking, you know, in coalition building with poor white folks, waking them up to the, you know, folks who are actually keeping them down. So, you know, they're just parallels. The parallels are nonstop, because so little has changed.
I feel that. And, you know, the film shows the American government engaging in what in a non-Western society would only be called human rights abuses, right? Violations of their citizens' rights, assassination of dissidents, so on and so forth. Do you think a lot of the public are going to be shocked seeing that? Or do you think 2020 has sort of in a way prepped people to recognize the nature of the beast, so to speak?
It's tough to say. I mean, I don't think people are necessarily shocked by it, but I like, sometimes when I think about sort of the potential of this movie to sort of, you know, open people's eyes, and then I remember the fact that, you know, millions of people died from the coronavirus and people don't want to wear a mask. I don't know if a piece of pop culture is going to shift things. If, you know, your dead mom didn't move the needle, you know what I mean? So I don't know, you know.
I hear you. And in terms of scenes in the film, right? This one for you, Daniel, you know, preparing for that monumental speech, you know, that I am a revolutionary. What did that feel like? Did that day feel almost like, you know, I imagine it anyway, like a boxer, right? And that's like, filming that scene is like fight night. Did you feel you had to prep specifically for that particular scene, or was it just part of the overall process?
No, it was a wild scene because I had to learn it a week before I shot it because I had the Queen and Slim press. So I text Shaka, I was like, yo, the lines ain't, because, you know, lines used to change in this shoot from time to time. So the lines ain't changing, right? I'm about to learn it like the Friday before we did it, like Monday after. And then, and so I learned it, and then I was doing this press run, and I think I was exhausted, and I woke up 20 minutes late after my pickup, and it was just a kind of really mad day. But I did it like any other. In the morning, I would listen to, because I heard that Chairman Fred would listen to Malcolm X speeches and listen to Martin Luther King speeches. So in that morning, I would listen to that, you know, and get into the frame of mind, listen to those speeches, listen to the essence of that, listen to the spirit of that. And then I couldn't see it as a day bigger than any other day, because then I would get in my own way, because that's about my ego. You know what I'm saying? And then I'll be like, all right, cool. What how am I serving? You know what I'm saying? I'm pulling up, I'm serving. You know what I'm saying? I come there, and then and there's 450 people. You know what I'm saying? LaKeith come out of nowhere, hug me, and then Shaka comes and goes, yo, we're shooting the rehearsal. I say, let's shoot the rehearsal. I mean, and then you just, it is like that. It does feel like a boxing kind of energy, but I think when you start hearing the Chairman Fred, you just check out. You know, you just check out and go, that's what all the work that was put in beforehand. It's like, how I see it is that you can't think. Like I learned how to act through improv. And so how I had a saying when I was doing improv a lot is like, when you're in your head, you're dead. You know what I'm saying? So like how I kind of see it, I was like, yo, let's do this. Let's channel this. Let's step. But everything in the setting was facilitating for me to get into that place. You know, like the way that the people of Cleveland like really lifted me up. You know what I'm saying? In those speeches, and would respond as like they were listening, you know, they weren't just like acting, they were listening, you know, and but we were saying Chairman Fred's actual words. I think it was his first speech, so we said that. So it was a day where I kind of, Daniel, I checked out essentially and kind of gone, and I kind of just preserved myself in between takes, and then I had to just give my all and just be that channel is how I saw it.
It's not a question of violence or non-violence. It's a question of resistance to fascism or non-existence within fascism. You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom. I said, hey, I'm revolutionary. Hey, I'm revolutionary. Hey, I'm revolutionary. Hey, I'm revolutionary. Let me hear the people beat. Let me hear the people beat.
I feel like the architecture of that space even lent itself to the feeling of a boxing match. I remember that's one of the reasons I was like, we have to shoot there, because I remember seeing that staircase and just feeling like it's. I remember we had you even pacing or like sitting in the space below, like you hear them chanting your name, and we wanted it to feel like, you know, when I've always wished that I could fight just so I could come out of a tunnel and feel everyone cheering for me. You know what I mean? I was like, that's what that was supposed to be for you, you know, and it had that effect.
But also, I kind of, another thing I used to think about was like, he'd been in prison and he'd been dreaming about the people. He'd been dreaming, he's been there in solitary confinement, thinking about the people, thinking about what's happening outside. Do you know what I'm saying? And he's like, he's waited so long to talk to them, to see them, to feel them. That really sat with me in the beginning of the day when I was pacing. It was like, yo, I've been waiting on this. They got me in confinement for no fucking reason. Do you know what I'm saying? And I'm waiting. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of like, and it's always kind of like, he was like overwhelmed to the point where it focused him. You know what I'm saying?
They let the panther out the cage, bro.
Yeah.
They let the panther out the cage, fam.
Yeah.
100%. We actually have to wrap up in a sec. This is going to be my last question. Unfortunately, I got a million other questions I wanted to ask you guys, and I'm not sure this is even the one I want to part with, but we're here now. You know, of all of the revolutionaries of that period, Daniel, you mentioned Malcolm X, right? Why do you think Fred, perhaps it's only now his story's getting told, he's perhaps not as well known as some of the others? Why do you think maybe in the scheme of it, even other Panthers, people like Huey or etc., why do you think Fred probably isn't as well known to the wider public outside of the community and people who know these things, so to speak?
I think because he was unquestionably assassinated by the US government, and they didn't have an opportunity to drive him crazy and then get him hooked on drugs. The Panthers are very specific about the fact that they don't want him portrayed as a messiah figure. But something that we would discover, you know, in trying to research him and learn about him, was just like, it was really tough to identify character flaws. And so, you know, I think one of the reasons why you don't hear about him is because if you were taught about him, then the state would have to acknowledge that they murdered him at 21 years old for no other reason that he was trying to like make the world a better place. And then you'd have to start looking into, you know, the state's history of doing that, not just to, you know, dissidents in the US, but abroad, you know, and that would lead to just, you know, the dismantling of this facade of America that exists and that they purport worldwide, you know?
I think about today as well, when there's a victim of police brutality or something, where they throw up a mugshot, right? And they try to go down the record of who they are and what they did that could have warranted the treatment. However, with Chairman Fred, like we said, at 21 years old, they didn't have that. So they had to bury it in that sense, because they couldn't, what were they going to throw up against us for all to see? You know what I mean? To try to discredit him. It was harder than, I think, other leaders.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. It feels like a bit of a sad note to end on, but congratulations, really well done. Like, proper please for you guys. Can't wait for everybody to see this film. And big ups, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, man.
Thank you.